Thank you, sir. May I now request Mr. Ahamadi, Senior Advocate, to say a few words and share his thoughts?
Good evening. I'd like to start with a declaration with Justice Vishwanathan's permission that the law of content doesn't apply. So therefore, we can all speak without any inhibition. Uh, the best of legal humor that I've seen, I think, is when a lawyer manages to speak truth to power and truth to the judge, because that's the biggest challenge for a lawyer to have. And the best legal quotes that at least I remember are when a lawyer is managing to tell a judge or speak truth to him. I remember an old friend, and he's much elder to me, but we were very friendly. And Mr. R.N. Trivedi, who was known for his wit and humor, and is of very, very happy memory. And I remember an incident where we were invited for a party at the residence of the late Mr. Soli Soraji. And there was a judge who, of the Supreme Court, who, if I may, not to put too fine a point on it, happened to be in love with his own voice. And there was a long monologue, and people were listening to him. And it was almost like a standing committee. And there were a lot of people who indulged him, who kept on listening and kept on saying, "Oh, sir, you're great, you're great." So Mr. Trivedi just dropped into the conversation from behind and asked me, "Hey, bhai, ho kya raha hai?" So I told him, the learned judge wanted to know from all of us and the members of the bar about how popular he was. So he let out a large chuckle first. And then the learned judge also made the mistake of asking him. So he said, "Saab, I'll be very frank and I must tell you कि सबका ये कहना है कि आप जो है आपसे कोई बढ़िया जज तो हो ही नहीं सकता, लेकिन सिर्फ एक एक्सेप्शन है इसमें, और एक्सेप्शन ये है कि यू आर वन ऑफ द फाइनेस्ट जजेस दैट वी हैव एवर सीन, extremely liberal, extremely popular, extremely good to juniors. By the way, the judge was pretty nasty to juniors. So he said very good to juniors. सिर्फ एक एक्सेप्शन है कि 10:30 बजे के पहले और 4 बजे के बाद to make this way. And this is one very sterling example of a lawyer, of a practicing lawyer, in a very nice way, telling a judge and speaking truth to power. So, importance of humor in adversity can't be underestimated. I think it's extremely important. Like even during the Holocaust days, even when movies and stories were on Holocaust, they were peppered with humor. And the underlying statement below that was, under that was, having that kind of humor, because a lot of people said that it's such a serious subject and you're trying to make it funny. And he said that no, it's very important to laugh so that we don't weep. Now, the father of the nation, also, Mahatma Gandhi, also in times of great adversity, and the freedom struggle was very long for us. He went to jail several times. But during the roundtable conference that he had, and he was also a lawyer and had great wit, but the witty part of Mahatma Gandhi is often not published or not put in the public domain that often. But I do in the after the roundtable conference when he went to meet the king, and he was dressed in his normal way. So as soon as he left, he was asked by journalists and said that, "Do you think it was proper for you, Mr. Gandhi, to meet the king dressed as you are?" So he immediately retorted He says, I think His Majesty weighs enough for both of us. He was also asked once about, in the same, after the same, he said, Mr. Gandhi, what do you think about Western civilization? He said, well, I think it's a good idea. He was also once asked, he says, Mr. Gandhi, why do you always travel third class? He says, because there's no fourth class. So humor in the context of adversity is extremely important, and these are quotes that we remember and become, in a sense, immortal. I was once discussing with a legal scholar who had come from the UK and who was from India and was asked at that point of time by some lawmakers to suggest certain amendments to the Criminal Procedure Code. And one of his suggestions was at that point of time that, well, in most civilized countries, subject to certain safeguards, confessions which are made to the police are admissible. So why is it that in India you don't make them admissible? And he was asking for my opinion as to as to on this question as to whether confession should be made admissible. And I said, look, I can only illustrate this point where a friend of mine would come back from the US and was arrested in Ahmedabad on charges of drinking. As you know, in Gujarat, there's prohibition. He had a drink. So when he was picked up and he was put in the police van and put inside he proceeded with in his usual way and asked the constable, said, please read me my rights. And what he got in return was a tight slap. So I said that illustrates why perhaps confessions should not be made admissible in India, because such is the state of our Indian police. So uh, I have spent about 31 years at the bar, and I can tell you from the limited experience that I have that very often the law does is an ass. I'll cite some examples of some curious laws in India. So, for example, under the Aircraft Act of 1934, you need a permission to fly a kite. And there is a fine of 10 lakhs which can be imposed if you fly a kite in certain zones without permission. Now, this is a very dangerous provision. And all lawyers and politicians must take note, because metaphorically, our profession only involves kite flying. So therefore, it will put us out of business. Similarly, till some time, I'm not very sure whether that provision has been changed, but under the Motor Vehicles Act, in order to be a police traffic inspector, you can be fired if you don't have pristine teeth or if your toes are crooked. And I'm not very sure whether it still stands in the statute book, but for a long time, till the 90s, that provision continued to exist. Now, on a personal level, about laws, lawyers, and the way we address and how we perceive ourselves in court and how we unstate and outside, I have a personal story that I must narrate. And in fact, my wife often narrates it to my friends with great glee and delight. And this was around the time when we were courting, we were engaged. And my wife was taking the Rajdhani back to Delhi. I was in court. And I just thought I'd go and see her off. So I was wearing a white shirt. I took off my bands. I put on a tie. And I was wearing my black coat. And I landed up at the station. I was a little surprised, though. In those days, you had to buy a platform ticket to enter the platform. So I bought a platform ticket. But the chap who was checking the platform tickets, you would check the platform tickets at the time of entry. Never checked them. And he gave me a salam. So I also wished him. I thought he had great respect for lawyers. So I walked in, and then I greeted I went, I saw her off, and then my wife is very, very cautious. So around 15 minutes before the train was to depart, he said, "No, you go and stand outside or something." And then she called me from Bombay saying that I was watching you from the window, and there was a whole lot of people who were coming across, meeting you, talking to you, and you were talking to them. What was going on? So I said to the great glee of my clerk, who was standing on the side and holding my files, I was mistaken for a ticket collector. So then my wife asked me, saying, "What did you do?" So I said, "I decided to have some fun." Then they asked me, "कि साहब वेट लिस्ट पे है?" I said, "चढ़ जाओ, कोई बात नहीं." And then after they got off, they all looked at me with with a lot of puzzle and exasperation. Because when the train started, they saw me standing outside. This is the guy who was supposed to help. So I waved out of the and said, "Bye."